Welcome, firefighters. It's so good to be back with you today, live and in person. Wherever you're watching, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Twitch, or on your website, please take a moment to drop your name and where you're joining from in the comments. I tell you every time, but it's true. I love hearing from you and knowing where you're from. And for those of you joining us for the first time, welcome to Fire Drill Fridays family, where we are building community, learning about the climate crisis, and taking action to address it. You can see lots of ways to take action to get involved at firedrillfridays.com/take action. So, my dear friends, I have something personal that I want to share. I've been diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and have started chemotherapy. It's a very treatable cancer. 80% of people survive, so I feel very lucky. I'm also lucky because I have health insurance and access to the best doctors and treatments. I realize, and it's painful to realize, that I'm privileged in this. Almost every family in America has had to deal with cancer at one time or another, and far too many don't have access to health insurance, quality care like I'm receiving, and it's just not right and has to change. We also need to be talking much more, not just about cures, but about causes. For example, people need to know that fossil fuels cause cancer. So do pesticides, many of which are derived from fossil fuels like mine. So anyway, I'm doing chemo for 6 months and I'm handling the treatments quite well. And believe me, I will not let any of this interfere with my climate activism. I think cancer is a teacher, and I'm paying attention to the lessons that it holds for me. One thing it's shown me already is the importance of community, of growing and deepening one's community so that we're not alone. And the cancer, along with my age, which is just about 85, definitely teaches the importance of adapting to new realities. We're living through the most consequential time in human history because what we do or don't do right now is going to determine what kind of future there will be. And I will not allow cancer to keep me from doing all I can, using every tool in my toolbox. And that very much includes continuing to build this Fire Drill Fridays community and finding new ways to use our collective strength to make change. The midterms are looming and they are beyond consequential. So you can count on me to be right there together with you as we grow our army of climate champions. So, time for some good news, and boy, do we have some. Xylophone called for. After years of effort from frontline communities, last night the California State Legislature passed Senate Bill 1137, which establishes a 3,200-foot public health setback between oil and gas extraction and sensitive sites including homes, schools, and hospitals. Governor Newsom has championed this legislature and is expected to sign it into law. This is a huge win. Due to the hard work of frontline and environmental justice communities, millions will be able to breathe cleaner air and live safer lives. This is how people power works. The fossil fuel industry did everything it could to defeat this bill, but people and communities came together to overcome polluter money and the army of fossil fuel lobbyists. At Fire Drill Fridays, we've done our best along the way to uplift the work of the brave frontline fighters who earned this victory. Before COVID, we had a Fire Drill Friday in Wilmington. In fact, I think it was our last live rally where people have gotten so ill in Wilmington from living close to wells, to oil wells. I've toured the area with Jennifer Siebel Newsom, the governor's wife, and Deleli Cobo, the young woman who hosted the Fire Drill Fridays while I was in Italy. She's been fighting since she was 9 years old to shut down the well across from her that gave her cancer. So I am over the moon, and millions of other people in California are. This is historic and hard won. The fact that this bill has passed, and it really shows what's possible when communities unite to fight together. Be sure to take time to celebrate this huge win. This is a biggie. And hey, I've got more good news. This is Fire Drill Friday's personal good news. Back in April of 2020, when we didn't know what would happen when we moved Fire Drill Fridays online. I mean, we didn't know if people would tune in during the pandemic. I am so proud to share that right now, during this broadcast, we've reached 10 million Fire Drill Friday viewers. 10 million. One of you out there right now is the 10 millionth viewer. And I'm so grateful that you and the entire Fire Drill Friday family are here. This is one big source of hope for me personally, because we're building the power that we need for more wins. Also, starting this week, Fire Drill Friday is coming back weekly. That's right. We'll be here every Friday live at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern from now till the end of the year, sharing crucial updates, explainers, ways that you can take action, interviews, and more, all with yours truly. Next Friday, for example, at 11 a.m. Pacific, join me to find out what happened with the Global Oceans Treaty negotiations at the UN last week and what it means for saving our seas. Today, we're going to take an inside look at what's happening in Congress on our climate. The good, the bad, and the truly ugly, and what we can do about it. Over the last 3 years, we've had so many activists, scientists, elected officials, and artists to come on Fire Drill Friday to share how serious the climate crisis is, how fossil fuels like oil and gas are the #1 driver of climate change, and how we can take action to make a difference. We've called on governors, members of Congress, and the president to take action. We've celebrated wins along the way and shared our frustration when the actions our elected officials have taken have fallen far short of what the science makes clear is needed. So last month, finally, Congress passed a bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, and while you wouldn't think so from its name, it actually contains a lot on climate. If you've been reading the news and following the conversation on social media, you know that there's a wide range of opinions on this bill, which is very understandable if you really know what's in it. The good news is that this bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, IRA, is one of the largest investments in renewable energy in the history of our country. $370 billion over the next 10 years will go towards expanding the use of electric vehicles, advancing solar and wind power, and developing newer energy sources like clean hydrogen. We'll talk more about this with our guest in a moment. And it's estimated that the bill has the potential to create millions of jobs. You need to know that none of this would have happened were it not for the growing power of the climate movement and we the people. You know, we may not have all the money of the fossil fuel industry, but we have the power. If we actually join together and use it, and that's what Fire Drill Fridays is all about. We work with the Sunrise Movement, Extinction Rebellion, Indigenous Environmental Network, Center for Biological Diversity, People versus Fossil Fuels, and local grassroots groups that are on the front line fighting oil and gas projects like Pueblo Action Alliance, Port Arthur Community Action Network, Rise St. James, and so many more. And whatever else is in the bill, and we're going to find out soon what that is, getting these things is critical, and we should celebrate. But why are there always so many buts when it comes to climate legislation? But there's a lot in this bill that shows us that the fossil fuel industry's influence in Congress is still being strangled. You know, I won't make an analogy to an octopus because I love octopus and it'll give them a bad name, but it's a stranglehold. Oil and gas has a stranglehold on way too many Democrats as well as Republicans. You know, this bill puts money towards some of the most important solutions that we need, but it doesn't adequately address implementation issues. If the utilities, for example, will actually use this money for renewable energy, maybe they won't. They're not forced to in this legislation, or the fact that we need to phase out fossil fuels. This is it's like trying to bail out a flooding boat with a bucket, but not plugging the hole. See, fossil fuels are the #1 driver of climate change. And this bill requires the government to lease our precious public lands and waters to oil and gas companies if we also want to utilize these areas for renewable energy projects. I mean, we want a wind turbine, we have to have an oil well. It's unconscionable. It flies in the face of science, and it makes absolutely no sense. The best science out there shows us that just investing in the solution, solar panels, electric vehicles, a new grid, wind turbines, that doesn't bring us the change that we need fast enough. And this is like the bedrock thing that everybody needs to understand and get clear about. And you'd be shocked at how many climate activists and organizations don't talk about fossil fuels. Maybe because it's board members invest in oil and gas, or they work with officials who take money from fossil fuels, and it's really harder, and gets far more pushback when you talk about fossil fuels and not just renewable energy. But we have to proactively phase out fossil fuels at the same time that we invest and build out clean energy if we want to stop the worst effects of climate change. This is why climate scientists unanimously say we have to cut fossil fuel emissions in half by 2030 if we're to avoid catastrophe. And that brings us to some truly alarming news. In order to secure Senator Manchin's support for this bill, Senator Schumer and Senator Manchin agreed to a side deal behind closed doors. This side deal, which we're calling a dirty deal, would fast-track fossil fuel projects like oil and gas pipelines that our planet cannot afford. It would gut tools like public comment periods and tribal consultations, which means silencing the public's voice on proposals that threaten their water, land, and public health. Now, the good news is that we can stop this dirty deal, and in doing so, show Congress that people have had enough. 1 in 3 people have experienced extreme weather this year. A majority of the nation is alarmed or concerned about climate. The science community is screaming out a code red alarm. And the senator who receives more fossil fuel money than any other, Joe Manchin, forces a deal to increase fossil fuels. Enough! We have to stop this. It's dangerous, it's undemocratic, it's a sellout of our climate and our future to fossil fuel executives. But it's not inevitable. We have a real shot at stopping this dirty deal. Our members of Congress work for us, right? We don't owe Manchin anything. They don't owe Manchin anything. They owe us. They owe us clean air and a livable planet. So let's hold their feet to the fire. Now, maybe you're the kind of person who wants to jump right into action right now. So if that's you, call 1-888-593-5407 to call your congressperson right now. Tell your representative to vocally oppose Manchin's dirty deal that fast tracks oil and gas projects across America. I've been an activist for 60 years, and I can tell you from experience that contacting elected officials really, really matters. Sometime I'll tell you a story about how I really know that in my gut. If you're joining us from your phone, be sure to make the call and then come right back to hear the rest of what we have in store. And I will personally thank the first 5 people who make calls later in this show. You can also go to firedrillfridays.com/takeaction to sign up to drop in person. Drop by your elected officials' offices in person to deliver the message, because that's the kind of energy and action it's going to take to stop this. Now, if you're the kind of person who wants to dig in and understand exactly what's going on and how exactly your actions can make a difference, you're in luck. We happen to have a leading expert to help us understand this dirty deal and what we can do about it. Jean Sue is the Director of Energy Justice Program and a senior attorney at the Center for Biological Diversity. Jean's been instrumental in developing the climate emergency executive order that is the actual mechanism for how Biden can use his powers to declare a climate emergency and take bold climate action, which is something we've been working towards, as you know, on Fire Drill Fridays for some time. Jean has also taken a leading role in fighting against fossil fuel handouts in Congress that were part of the Inflation Reduction Act and against the dirty deal that we've been talking about. I'm so happy and honored to welcome to Fire Drill Fridays Jean Sue. Jean, it's wonderful to have you join us.
Thanks so much for having me, Jane, and it's such an honor to be here. And I also do just want to convey, I'm so sorry to hear about your news about your diagnosis. And you know, we all know you're a national treasure, and and that we will keep going. And also, such huge congratulations to everybody in California for fighting so hard and winning this incredible decades-long win. This is absolutely amazing. So congratulations to everyone. It is a win for the planet.
Thank you, Jean. Now, listen, your title says Energy Justice Program Director. Can you explain a little bit about what energy justice means to you and why it's important?
Yeah, so I think one way to start thinking about energy justice is actually thinking about energy injustice, which is currently our energy system. Right now, we have a fossil fuel energy system that perpetuates racism and violence, and it does it in a number of ways. One way is that 1 in 6 families right now actually cannot afford to pay their energy bills. Fossil fuel electricity prices have increased by 15% and is making electricity unaffordable. That's one way. Another way, of course, is what is happening in California in the wind just now, how fossil fuel projects that feed our energy system are built disproportionately in communities of color and poisoning them. That's a second way. And a third way, of course, is how that fossil fuel energy system is laying bare climate disasters disproportionately, again, on communities who carry the burdens at the front lines. And we can only think about Jackson, Mississippi, Pakistan, Missouri underwater, and California and Arizona right now under tremendous heat waves. The communities that feel that the most are the same communities feeling the other sources of violence. So that's energy injustice. What is energy justice? Energy justice is the opposite of that. It is actually making sure that this transition we're moving to for renewable energy actually centers environmental justice and frontline communities first. That means they are getting the community and rooftop solar they need and storage to withstand climate disasters, to have affordable and clean energy that isn't poisoning them, and to also take democratic control over these energy choices. So it's not private utilities that are still banging out record shareholder profits. It is them that is receiving the economic benefits of a clean energy system.
Sounds fantastic. Thank you, Jean. Let's take a deeper look at just what happened in Congress. First, what is the good news for the climate from the Inflation Reduction Act? What can we celebrate?
Yeah, so I think it's important that we're really clear-eyed about what is in this bill and also what is not in this bill. One thing, the big headline for this bill is that we have $369 billion injected into our economy for mostly renewable and clean energy. And that comes in the form of mostly tax incentives for corporations to manufacture clean energy products and to deploy clean energy onto our grid. So that's kind of cash carrots into that system. There are a couple of really important parts for environmental justice communities. Environmental justice communities are estimating $40 billion in the bill over 10 years to help them bring on those technologies. And American consumer households will also get tax rebates and tax breaks on rooftop solar, heat pumps, and other weatherization technologies. But I think it's also important to understand that $369 billion in the context of where we are on climate. $369 billion spread out over 10 years is $37 billion a year, which is 4% of our defense budget. Our priorities in this country are absolutely flipped upside down. And while this is a first important step to the transition that we need towards renewable energy, it is not close to the transformation that this country inherently needs, especially because of the racist energy system that we have right now.
Wow. Climate scientists say that we have to cut fossil fuel, emissions in half by 2030. How far towards that goal does the Inflation Reduction Act take us?
Yeah, so models say that right now, even without the Inflation Reduction Act, our current policies are going to help us cut emissions by 30% below 2005 emission levels by 2030. That was a lot of buys, but basically we are at a status quo of 30%. What the IRA does is that it adds an extra 10% crest on that to help us get to 40% emissions reductions. But as you just said, in your opening, we need to get globally to 50% emissions reductions. And the Biden administration has also committed to that 50%. So we're still 10% away from our own national goals and many, many percentage points away from our actual debt that we owe the world in terms of our historic, as the #1 historic climate emitter. And so that means we have so much to do in terms of President Biden declaring a climate emergency and unleashing every single executive power in his quiver to make sure that we crest over that last 10% and fill that emissions gap.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned climate emergency, but before we go there, I just want to ask you something. You said that it offers these financial incentives to the utilities to go to renewable energy. Are they required to do that in this bill?
No, they absolutely are not. So one of the funky parts about how this bill was passed is that it was passed in this special process called reconciliation, where essentially you raise money and you spend money. So all of those renewable energy credits are credits. It's really on the table for companies to take, and they have full discretion as to whether or not to take them. One of the really disturbing parts right now is that clean energy is already cheaper than fossil fuel energy, but utilities are not picking them up. It's actually in the utility business model to upcharge their rates in order for us to pay them. That's how they actually make money. So it's in their interest to actually make more expensive projects, not less. So one of the biggest concerns that we have with this bill is implementation and making sure that the next part of implementing this is everybody holding the feet to the fire of utilities and public utility commissions to make sure that those clean energy projects are coming online.
Can consumers do that, or does that have to be government?
So absolutely both. Right now, utilities actually, and these are monopoly private utilities, they are doing a ton of things to jack up the system. They are trying to kill rooftop solar in terms of statutes. They are trying to delay your interconnection of rooftop solar for months on end until you give up in frustration. So they're doing everything in their power to quash competition of clean energy, especially clean energy that they don't necessarily benefit or profit from. So something that we have asked the Federal Trade Commission to do is actually, the Federal Trade Commission is the commission that is, the mothers and fathers of antitrust law and basically trying to protect competitors from being squashed out. We're asking them to actually take on a utility industry investigation to stop this quashing of competition of that rooftop solar and storage that especially frontline communities need right now to combat the climate crisis. So that's something that the federal government can do. And then on state levels, everybody has their own state utility commission. It's really a very difficult black box for a lot of people to understand, but I urge everyone here to get involved in your utility commission. That's the place that actually makes the energy decisions for your state right now. So you have to get involved. We have to break open that black box, and they have to know that people want renewable energy. They're tired of this fossil fuel future.
Thank you for clarifying that. Maybe we have to dedicate a Fire Drill Friday to helping us all understand how do we access the utility that we have and make them do what they need to do. Boy, thank you. In July, Biden said that since Congress wasn't acting on climate, he was going to use his executive powers to combat the climate emergency. We've talked a lot on Fire Drill Fridays about the need for Biden to declare a climate emergency. Now that Congress has passed this bill, does it take away the urgency for Biden to declare a climate emergency?
Absolutely not. We are actually in the golden period where President Biden absolutely needs to declare this climate emergency. You know, from a pure carbon modeling perspective, we're still 10% in gap in terms of emissions reductions. And the president has all the powers in his quiver to actually make up that 10% and more. But even more importantly, the IRA actually just left a lot of business undone. And one of the biggest parts is confronting fossil fuels head on. I know we'll talk about the bad parts of the IRA in a second, which actually perpetuates fossil fuels, but the IRA didn't nab fossil fuels at all. It basically allowed for an all hands on deck approach with every single, whether it's fossil fuels or renewable energies on the table. The climate crisis absolutely requires that fossil fuels be taken off that table. And President Biden actually has the ability to end production of fossil fuels, existing production and new production. He has the single-handed unilateral ability to do that. And that's absolutely what we're asking him to do. Another thing that IRA doesn't have is that it has no sticks. It offered just carrots on a table. Please take it. But guess what? We need some sticks, and we need some sticks immediately. And one of those sticks that President Biden also has is this very cool power under the Clean Air Act to set national greenhouse gas limits on the country. He actually can do that. That's separate from the Clean Power Plan. It is something that the Center for Biological Diversity and 350.org started asking for in 2009. And we have still had that petition live. It is something that 7 states in the territory of Guam a couple of weeks ago actually wrote a letter to the EPA to ask them to do it. And it is also something that Chief Justice Roberts, in his West Virginia versus EPA Supreme Court decision, said that type of regulation of limiting and setting a cap on greenhouse gas emissions, that is a viable option under the Supreme Court's reading of the Clean Air Act. So I think this is such an important and key regulation that we have to get the Biden administration to do. And then one final, piece of all this is that in 2015, we actually made a really deadly deal, again, very similar in some ways, or echoes ghostily to what just happened in IRA and this new permitting deal. We made a trade of getting more production tax credits for wind and solar in exchange for opening up a 40-year ban on crude oil exports. And that ban, basically, the product of that since 2015 till now has been the absolute release of the largest carbon bomb in the world. We are talking about the Permian Basin that has been drilled and that has unleashed the equivalent of 48 coal plants pollutions every year, and which is poisoning Gulf towns, cities, and everybody that is along the line of that Permian Basin route. To just have incredible environmental justice consequences. What the president can do, when that statute was actually written, it had an incredible safety valve in it. It actually said, if the president declares a climate emergency, he can reinstate this crude oil export ban. So that's what we're asking President Biden to do. We are in the emergency of our lives. It gets worse and worse every day. And guess what? You have the power to put back that ban. And so we are asking you to do that for the sake of environmental justice communities and for the planet. Put that ban back on.
Great. So painful as it is, Jane, can you explain to us the not so good news for the climate that's in the Inflation Reduction Act? And when she says IRA, she's talking about the Inflation Reduction Act, folks.
Great. Yeah. And for, Irish fans out there, we can call it the IRA to make it more digestible. Unfortunately, the Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA, is it's a compromise, and it was in a lot of ways a hostage situation that Congress was feeling, where the fossil fuel industry was holding hostage our healthcare benefits, renewable energy credits, and tax incentives for more fossil fuel giveaways. And unfortunately, the IRA and now this new permitting deal have those fossil fuel giveaways in them. So what is in the IRA specifically that is that? So one Easter egg, which, that's what the oil and gas companies called it, Easter eggs that Manchin left for them in the IRA. One of them is actually this very perverse provision where if the federal government wants to build wind or solar on our federal lands or waters, they are absolutely handcuffed and chained to offering the lease of 600 million acres of oceans and 20 million acres of our federal lands to oil and gas drilling for the next 10 years. That is an extremely perverse and ridiculous provision. And we all know, as Jane was saying, and we began with this, every single climate scientist in the world, the United Nations Secretary General, everyone is saying, in order for our climate to survive, we cannot have one more new production of fossil fuel. That is absolutely incompatible with surviving. So that provision is a terrible, terrible provision that is basically a go ahead, keep going, drill, baby, drill, fossil fuels, fossil fuel industry, you still, have your stranglehold over us. The second thing that it had in it was that it actually allowed for leases, specific lease sales that had been defeated in court and politically defeated in the Gulf and Alaska. It reopened those leases to go ahead for drilling. And that is actually such a heartbreaking story because those particular leases in the Gulf of Mexico and in Alaska have been fought tooth and nail by environmental justice communities and environmental organizations like ours. We have litigated it for years upon years and won, but this legislation single-handedly strips those victories off the table and says, you didn't win, we're going to legislate it in, you lose. That is just so appalling to our democratic process, to the other two branches of government. And that was a second horrible giveaway in the IRA.
God. So, Jean, before we move on to the side deal, the dirty deal, I have one more question about the IRA. It's passed. It's a done deal. If Biden declares a climate emergency, can he, even though this is a bill that's become a reality, can he still undo those leases with an emergency bill?
Great question. So if he declares a climate emergency, President Biden still has the ability to not lease. So for the Arctic and the Gulf sales, unfortunately, those specific ones are legislated in. But for the other pieces, like the option of leasing or the option of offering leasing on 600 million acres of our public waters, those are still optional to a certain extent because you don't have to actually lease the land for renewable energy. But kind of zooming out a little bit, President Biden and Secretary Haaland still have the ability to choose whether to lease or not. That is just within their authority. But more importantly, after leasing is the actual permits for production. And both Secretary Haaland and President Biden have the ability to say no to production. That is actually kind of the key golden egg right now. We have to get President Biden and Secretary Haaland to say no production on existing leases or new leases. No production. We are ending this. We are phasing it out. And that's the real key link here. So the IRA does some things, but my goodness, President Biden has the ability to counteract that and stop the production on the spot.
Thank you for clarifying that. And so what's with this dirty side deal that everybody's talking about on fossil fuel permitting? What's really in it?
So one of the things that I think people have to understand is that Senator Schumer and Senator Manchin came together in a gentleman's agreement and wrote out what each of them would agree to. So the IRA and this new permitting dirty deal came together as a bulk package. So it's really important for people to understand that they were always meant to come together. And this is not some, random side deal. This was always baked in with each other. And that is really disturbing. And that is the price of IRA. That is the price of those renewable energy credits. One of the very disturbing facts is that Senator Schumer, in this gentleman's agreement, agreed to pass this in some type of must-pass legislation in order to honor his side of the deal. And the intention was to pass it sometime in September. It's already September 2nd right now. Nobody has the official text of this deal. So what is precisely in this? Like, what is the exact text? It hasn't even been released yet. And people are supposed to vote on this in a couple of weeks. That in and of itself is crazy in terms of our democratic process, that senators haven't even seen this, or members of Congress, but actually the fossil fuel industry, like the American Petroleum Institute, has, but actual lawmakers have not. So having said that we don't know the actual specific final language yet, we have had leaks of what is in this. And the leaks have come in the form of a watermarked bill by the American Petroleum Institute. It's in the watermark there. And that was released to the press, as well as a wish list from Senator Manchin. So let's get into, based on those two documents alone, what is in there. It will truncate the public's ability to protest projects, especially fossil fuel projects across the country. So right now, the country has some really incredible bedrock environmental laws. One of them is the National Environmental Policy Act. I think many people's eyes start glazing over when you think about environmental reviews, but environmental reviews in this country are actually a bedrock of our democracy. For many environmental justice communities, it is the only tool available to them to fight back against fossil fuel projects that are poisoning their communities. What this bill does is that it truncates the amount of time that they have to voice opposition and offer review. It truncates the amount of time that agencies have to actually do meaningful analysis of what these projects will actually do to communities and the planet and wildlife, and to actually think about credible alternatives to them. So this is an assault on our democracy. This is an assault on our basic and fundamental environmental tools we have to fight against fossil fuels. And that's what is at stake for this permitting bill. It is ramshackling and ramming through fossil fuel projects that climate scientists, again, have said, we have no room for that in our carbon budget.
No. Boy, why was this a separate side deal between Manchin and Schumer and not included in the IRA?
So, because our democracy is falling apart, short answer, longer answer is that the reconciliation process is this really special process that, as I said before, is really limited in what it can do. It can only raise money and it can only spend money, which means that anything else, any type of policy like these permitting rollbacks, etc., those have to go into normal legislation. But why did we even go down this route of reconciliation to begin with? It's because reconciliation avoids the filibuster right now. And that means that 50 votes with a tie-breaking vote from Vice President Kamala Harris can actually pass this piece of budget legislation. So that's why much of the climate pieces were put into this money spending type of legislation. Mm-hmm. Separately, Manchin wanted these huge rollbacks to our environmental protections that has no obvious money tie, although one could get pretty creative, but that therefore had to be put in this extra deal, but it came together as a bulk package.
I see, thank you. What's next for the deal, and who will ultimately decide if it passes?
So what is next for the deal is that we as a community and the United States have to band together and stop this deal. So what is intended is every year, the government or Congress has to pass what they call these must-pass bills to keep the government running, the lights on. It usually comes in the form of appropriations bills at the end of the year or defense bills. All of that is to say, it is, again, this hostage situation where no member of Congress wants to vote to shut down the government. And side note, government workers here in DC are actually disproportionately part of communities of color. And so to shut down our government is also not great for environmental justice. So nobody wants to do that, and they're in a hostage situation to pass it. So the idea, as part of this Manchin-Schumer package, was to ram this piece of permitting bill into that must-pass bill because people will have to pass it. What we have to do at this stage is stop that process dead in its tracks. That's absolutely unacceptable. We should never have this bill be attached to any must-pass bill. We have to kill it right now. And what that means is that it should never come to the floor to begin with. We have to let Senator Schumer and Nancy Pelosi know that this is absolutely unacceptable and the public will not accept this, and neither will House representatives or senators. So what that means is that we all have this incredible ability to work together and stop this bill.
Mm-hmm. What's the best way for Fire Drill Fridays firefighters around the country to take action to help stop the dirty deal?
Absolutely. So it's amazing that there are 10 million viewers. Let's get every single one of 10 million viewers and all of you out there right now live to do exactly what Jane just told you to do. Call that number on your screen, and that will hook you up to your House representative or your senator and tell them to oppose this deal. This deal has to be struck down. It has to be killed. It can never be brought to the floor or attached to any must-pass bill. That's the most important thing that you can do right now. Pick up your phone, pause this. This is recorded, come back later, and call them. And if all of us do that together, we have such a real shot at stopping this bill. The other thing that you can do that Jane had mentioned is physically get up and go visit your representative's office. Already this week, we have had actions from San Francisco all the way to New York and everywhere in between. People have been sitting in front of their representative's office. Those representatives owe nothing to Senator Manchin. They owe everything to us. And that means from now till when this deal dies, we have to be hitting those offices physically every day with calls and physical protests to make this happen.
I love you, Jean. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us some clarity on what's happening in Congress around the climate. Keep up the excellent work, and we'll be right there with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jane.
So let's take a moment to celebrate us, the movement that laid the groundwork and fought for decades to pass historic climate change legislation. We must always remember to celebrate the good stuff, no matter what. And then let's roll up our sleeves to push for more and to stop this disastrous dirty deal that would speed up fossil fuel permitting and lock us into decades of climate pollution that our planet can't afford. You know the drill, firefighters. To make change, we need to take action, because this is such an important moment. Fire Drill Fridays and Greenpeace are making it an all-hands-on-deck moment, where we're pushing as hard as we can to stop this dirty deal. So today we're going to try something a little different. We're going to take action together, here and now. So let's all take a few minutes to call our representatives in Congress together. It's so critical that they're bombarded with messages urging them to vocally oppose this dirty deal, so that Speaker Pelosi sees a wall of opposition that it's not worth for her to try to ram this deal through. Making a call is easy. Just dial 1-888-593-5407. And you'll hear a voice recording of Adrienne from Greenpeace explaining what to say, and then you'll automatically be connected to your representative. And when you get connected, this is what you want to tell them. Hi, my name is blank, I live in blank, and I'm calling to urge Representative Blank to vocally oppose Manchin's dirty deal that fast-tracks oil and gas projects across America. This deal could endanger our climate and public health and flies in the face of democratic norms. So please tell Representative Blank to do everything in their power to stop it. Now, if you're on Facebook or YouTube, we'll also drop the script in the chat. Listen, you might end up speaking to a staffer, but they're very polite. Their job is to listen to what you have to say. And if someone doesn't pick up, be sure to leave a message about why you're calling. Just say the whole thing on the voicemail, and it counts either way. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, I already know my representative is a climate champion. Do I really need to call? Yes, yes. Those are the people we really need to be up in arms and to let Pelosi know she can't attach this to the government spending bill or something. You know, not just opposing, but actively fighting this bill and calling on Speaker Pelosi and other members of Congress to do the same. That's what they have to do. And if they've already done it, then thank them. They don't get enough thanks, the ones that are doing the right thing. Now, some others of you might be thinking, but why call my representative? They're a lost cause. They'll never be on our side. And I say, yeah, call them too. It's important for them to hear that there are people who are ready to hold them accountable. And if you're a little nervous to call, I know that's normal, especially if you've never done it before, but this is so important. I'm asking you to do it anyway. It's important that we go outside our comfort zone when we're fighting for something that has to do with whether there's going to be a livable future. And remember, your representative works for you. So if you can, please dial this number right now. It's urgent, and we need your action to defeat the dirty deal. And if you're not somewhere where you can call at this moment, that's okay. Listen in, and you can call as soon as you are able. Okay, shall I go first? I'll go first. Okay, here I go. Let's see here. 253. See, now I'm hearing from Adrian from Greenpeace. Okay, she's explaining to me what to say. Okay. She says, I'll be connected now. And I've gotten a voicemail, so here I go. Hi, my name is Jane Fonda, and this is not a joke. I am the actor, and I live in Los Angeles, and I'm calling to urge Representative Karen Bass to vocally oppose Manchin's dirty deal that fast-tracks oil and gas projects across America. This deal would endanger our climate and public health, and it flies in the face of democratic norms. You've got to tell Representative Bass to do everything in her power to stop her. I'm expecting her to do that. Thank you. Okay, now it's your turn. Go ahead and make the call, and as you call, I'm going to take a moment to thank those who have already called in earlier in our show. Okay, I want to thank Sheila from Freeport, New York. Thank you, Sheila. Joyce from Seattle, Washington. Catherine from La Jolla, California. Carol from Beverly Hills. Karen from Tallahassee, Florida. Wonder if that's the Karen I know. Thank you all. Sheila, Joyce, Catherine, Karen, Carol, thank you for making the call. One of those people who just got on it right away at the beginning. Really appreciate it. And how are you all doing? Thank you for all of you who are making the calls right now. You know, time and again, history shows us the most effective way to stop dirty backroom deals like this is to directly contact our representatives and make noise. The more of us who take action, the better chance we have at winning. So thank you for making that call. And once you do, you'll also have the opportunity to multiply your impact by inviting friends and family to do the same. Now, if you've gotten this far, I think you're ready for our next challenge. Nothing is more powerful than showing up in person to deliver your message, and that's why Greenpeace is organizing people across the country to drop by their representative's office. You don't need an appointment. You can just show up to deliver this message. Sign up and we will provide you with a toolkit, a letter to deliver, and personal support from real people all along the way. So to sign up, you go to firedrillfriday.com/takeaction. Thank you all again for joining and for taking action together at this critical moment. Remember to join us weekly at 11 a.m. Pacific Time, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, starting next week. We have exciting and important content planned, starting with an inside look at what really happened at the Global Oceans Treaty UN negotiations in New York and what it means for saving our seas. You won't want to miss it, and I'll see you there. With so much happening in the world and in our lives, it could be easy to lose sight of progress we've made and the signs of hope. But like today's historic win in California, we are seeing what happens when we come together. We are powerful together, and that's a big reason for hope. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you'll join me in the fight. See you next time.